So this past winter, my heated grips failed on my 1+1 seat. What had happened was the wiring harness broke down here where the wires went into the backrest. Now I believe that this wiring harness is a option from Skidoo to put into a backrest that doesn't have heated grips. So when I got it from the dealer and this was all installed, I got the thing all together. Now I don't know if this was like an installation problem. I'm not 100% sure if you can buy a backrest with heated grips, but anyways, my problem is basically there was a loom on the wires that basically went right up to the grommet, and then it was just strictly wires and tape, and this was allowed to flap around, and then it broke my wires there, and they shorted together, wiped out the fuse for the heated grips, which is at the front of the gas tank in the vehicle, and is extremely difficult to get to, and I'll show you that later. So what I did was, because I didn't have a meter in the wintertime, I was fortunate enough that I've got these plugs for my battery tenders. So because I suspected, I didn't know if I had power or not there. I knew I had good power there because my battery tender's working. Plugged this in, blew my fuse for my battery tender. Knew my problem was isolated to the backrest. Took the backrest home on in between weekends and found my short there and fixed it. What I did to fix it was I took a wiring off of a battery tender accessory that has more rigid wiring, and then I put this plastic loom on it, which is also more rigid than what Skidoo had, and ran that up and into the backrest. So this is now fairly rigid. That way we avoid, any kind of breakage in the future. Now this failure happened within hundreds of kilometers. I don't do a lot with my backrest, not thousands of kilometers. I also built it so I have a little bit more harness sticking out, so I can utilize either plug if required. If something were to happen, or let's say this harness rubbed through or something like that, it blew the fuse, I still have an alternative power source on my battery tender for my 1+1 seats. All right, so I'll get into what I'm going to do with this, and how I'm going to try and improve the fuse location on this sled, because it is in a super not nice place. If you actually have to, if you're not going to do something like this to have a backup, the fuse location for this is, in my opinion, pretty ridiculous, and we'll get into that. So a little information about the 1+1 seat harness. Right now we're looking at the left side of my sled, 21 Renegade Turbo. Okay, so the harness is a T-harness that goes, from here to here. That's teeing into the taillight harness, and that's where it gets its power. Okay, so the big problem with this harness is, for one, there's a fuse there which I didn't even know existed, because it's actually really hard to find this information. So that's a lot of the reason I'm making this video, is so you guys don't have to go through the aggravation I did when it comes to finding the fuse. But the fuse for the 1+1 seat is right up here, okay? So keep in mind, this fuel tank is normally down. So there's a little solenoid here for the starter. You need to go in there with long needle nose pliers and a long pick and try and slip this tie strap here. Get a light so it's better. That little tie strap that holds the fuse from falling out, you got to move that aside, get in there with needle nose pliers, and swap that thing out. And by the way, it's like wintertime and you're doing it with bare hands, and you're doing it all through here, going in through here. All right, so what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take this harness out of here, and we're gonna make it right. We're gonna relocate that fuse to a place that you can actually get to it on the trail. I have the front section of the 1+1 seat harness out of the sled, and it's just a T-harness, right? So that's how it gets its power. Just plugs into an inline plug for the tail lamp, and you can see that's the plug right there, and then kind of there with my finger is, that's the other end of the plug pushed back, so the T-harness would go in. And then the fuse, the only place you could put it with such a low amount of wiring was basically up front here, pretty much in this close to the center of the sled, but more closer to the left side, beside the starter solenoid. And again, you're only going through here when the fuel tank's down. So I'm going to put in a weatherproof fuse holder I had lying around. This is the connector that holds the fuse, and I say connector, not fuse holder, because that's what it is. It is a wiring harness connector. They put a fuse in it, and they put a zip tie around it to hold the fuse in. All right, that's what Skidoo's giving you for a fuse holder, a non-weatherproof connector with a zip tie. It's very difficult to change this fuse in the sled to go through there. I've done it once, it's no treat, and I'd rather spend the time and do all this work now and make this super easy if I ever have to do it again, which I hope I shouldn't have to, but if ever it comes the time, then I'll be ready. So I'm going to take this. I've already got wires attached. I've crimped them in with a crimping tool, and then I put shrink wrap with glue on them so I have weatherproof connections. And then I'm going to, tape it up, and I'm going to probably add about 6 inches of wire or so, attach them to these guys here. And then what I'm going to do is, instead of, my fuse being up here by the solenoid, I'll just simply run it around the solenoid, probably zip tie it to the starter cable, and then the fuse is going to be right there when you open your panel. All right, I'll get that done. I'll show you the finished product. This is our finished harness just before install, so I added some wire to it so we can relocate that fuse to a nice convenient location, and that's a whole lot better than having the fuse just over here where you can't really get to it. And at least the guy who installed my harness when I bought the sled, made it accessible. Like this could have very easily been just left underneath the fuel tank and maybe not accessible at all. That's our fuse in its final spot, nice and convenient to get to, and hopefully we don't need to get to it, but there it is. Check out my other video. I did had a no start condition because of a corroded ground wire on my sled, so I had the tank off and the front of the sled off already. So this is one of the things I wanted to get done anyway, so it was a good opportunity to lift up the tank and change both those items. So if you want to know step by step how to take the top off of a G4 sled and take the fuel tank, I didn't take the fuel tank right off, I took the fuel tank so I can access underneath of it, but I have all that in the other video, so check it out. All right, thanks for watching.